to be created and founded within the state. It eliminates the implementation of voluntary diversity plans related to open enrollment. It modifies language regarding data collection, and it requires the State Board of Education to create a flexible student and school support program. Division 5 makes changes to the tuition and textbook tax credit. Division 6 is a methodology for determining enrollment and promoting school attendance. Division 7 makes changes to open enrollment laws, allowing for some good cause additions. And Division 8 deals with the purpose of school boards and adding a mission statement there. I'm sorry, Division 7 also deals with athletic eligibility. I was trying to see that and I'm not seeing it anywhere, but I believe that's in Division 7 as well. That's a basic overview of the bill. I'm sure most of you have had an opportunity to read it. It's been out for a few days, but I do want to go directly to Logan Shine with the governor's office to just weigh in, since this is one of the governor's priority bills that we're bringing before us today. Logan, could you share with us information from the governor's office?
Yep. Thank you, Senator Sinclair and subcommittee members. My name is Logan Shine. I'm here representing Governor Reynolds. I also have Molly Foley with me. She's the governor's education policy advisor. Today you got Senate Study Bill 1065. That's the governor's Student First Act, and that's exactly what it does. The bill puts students first by recognizing there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The heart of this bill is local control. We hear a lot about what is local control. We're empowering parents with the ability to choose what's best for their children, whether that's a different public school, whether it's a private school, a public charter school, homeschool, or any other learning environment that is best suited for their student. What we found in other states, when there is more choice in education, there is better outcomes for all students, not just the select few. You look at every bracket and there is improvement. This bill ensures that every child receives a quality education, regardless of their income, regardless of where they live in the state. I just want to thank you guys for your time. We are here to answer questions as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Logan. At this point, I would like to open the floor to any beginning comments from either of the senators, or if you would prefer to just save comments till the end, we will we'll save the last 20 or so minutes at the end for the subcommittee participants to speak. Senator Quirmbach, would you like opening comments or hold it till the end?
Well, let me just say, appreciate everybody participating today. Thank you to you, Senator Sinclair, for agreeing to a 90-minute session. This is a very long and complicated bill. I'm sure there will be a lot of good comments from the people attending today.
Thank you, Senator Quirmbach. Senator Zahn?
No.
All right, we'll hold further comments till the end. What I would like to do is we're just going to go through the participants with their hands up, and we're just going to go through them one by one, starting with, it looks like Mark Jacobs. We're going to start with you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee very much. My name is Mark Jacobs. I'm the president and founder of an organization called Reaching Higher Iowa. We are a nonprofit organization that's committed to restoring Iowa's leadership position in K-12. I want to comment this morning in particular on Division 2, which deals with public charter schools. And I recognize that many of the committee members may have limited experience or familiarity with charters, given that we don't have much of a track record in Iowa with them. But I'd like to make 5 brief points. Number one, public charter schools are public schools. They're open to all. There's no admission criteria, and they don't charge tuition. Number two, public charter schools have the highest level of accountability of any type of schools. They operate under performance contracts, and if they don't meet that performance criteria, the school may be closed. Number three, the focus of charter schools is on meeting unmet needs. And for those children whose needs may not be best served by traditional public school alternatives, in particular in Iowa, we have unmet needs when it comes to certain children growing up in low-income households, students of color, English language learners, career and technical training, STEM and STEAM, and particularly for the career and technical and STEM team. Those are opportunities for our rural students that they don't always have the same opportunities that children from our urban and suburban campuses. Fourth point here is that public charter schools are not a new concept. They've been around since the early 1980s. Nationally, 3.3 million students, or 6.5% of all public school students, attend charter schools, and they are used by many, many other states to help round out and improve the overall outcomes delivered by the traditional public school system. The final point I'd like to make is that research supports positive outcomes for charter school students. Charter school students generally outperform their peers in traditional public schools, especially those children coming from low-income households. And as Logan Shine from the governor's office mentioned, states that have implemented a successful public charter program have seen that outcomes across the board for students have improved. And at the end of the day, that's what this is really about, is how do we improve overall educational outcomes for students? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mark. And I appreciate the fact that you kept your comments brief. I forgot to mention that because we have so many people wanting to speak. If you could be as concise as Mark just was in his comments as you share your concerns, we will be happy to take written comments as well from anyone. So just in an essence of time, please keep your comments brief. Connie Ryan, you're up next.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director and Lobbyist for Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund. I'm here representing thousands of Iowans across the state, people of faith and other beliefs. Iowans who are taxpayers, voters from rural, small towns and large metro areas. Iowans who believe that one of the primary responsibilities of our state government is to support and enhance the educational opportunities for Iowa's children through the public school system. Iowans who strongly oppose this legislation. 92% of Iowa students attend public schools. Many Iowa students live in urban areas that may have private educational choices, but many also live in rural small towns across Iowa with little to no private educational choices. Private school vouchers promote inequity for rural students and rural communities. Vouchers will take tax dollars from rural public schools, rural school children and taxpayers to pay for the private choices of families going to private schools in other parts of the state. Second, the charter school proposal will take away control from local school boards. Small towns to large cities, school boards understand the needs of the community. The bill takes away control from local leaders who are elected by the people and gives it to a small group of people in Des Moines who do not understand the local needs or dynamics, and that is wrong. Third, by eliminating the diversity plan for 5 districts, the legislation lacks understanding of our nation's history and does not appreciate the trajectory of society's social and racial justice movement for equity, equality, and full inclusion. Black lives do matter. Brown lives do matter. This legislation is blind to the inequities that already exist and the increased segregation of race and poverty it will create between districts. If Iowa wants public schools to succeed, Iowa must focus its public resources and invest generously in those public schools, not private choices. Iowans across the state and Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund urge you to oppose Senate Study Bill 1065. Thank you so much, Senators.
Thank you, Connie. Up next, we have Pete McRoberts.
There, I'm unmuted now, I think. Is that right?
You're good to go.
Okay,
Thank
terrific. Very quickly, my name is Pete McRoberts with the ACLU of Iowa. First thing I want to get out the door for your consideration is that the ACLU is deeply concerned about disparities among school districts and students. The fact is that group of students doing worse, we do consider that to be a civil rights issue. This is why the ESSA Act is even a consideration here due to the disparities in graduation rates. So out the door, I'd like to ask respectfully, if as you continue to work on that issue, if you'd please keep us involved. We care very deeply about that issue because quite simply, equal protection of laws is very, very important, particularly when it involves students. I'm going to avoid talking about some of the charter school issues. There's other people here much better than I am, but I want to get it on your radar respectfully with regard to the scholarship component. So our position is that a good balance, a policy balance for legislators to consider is that when you're passing a law or considering a law, that ultimately you got to balance whether or not it's got primarily a secular purpose, whether it doesn't enhance or inhibit religion in the state. So it's not necessarily neutral or opposed, but it's not, it doesn't put its thumb on the scale. And third, whether or not you can avoid an entanglement with a religious entity. We believe that that's been essential for religious freedom in the state of Iowa. The framers of the Iowa Constitution felt very similarly in Article 1, Section 3, with respect to the tithing and taxing clause, which frankly doesn't allow governments to mandate those things. Now, it's not 1858, and the world is different than it was, but we believe those considerations are valid and are worth thinking about. So, without going into every comma and dash and dot in all 60 of these pages, that's our concern, and we really are. We appreciate the intent because we want every government entity, from the legislature to the school board, to provide equal services to students. And if they don't, it's a civil rights concern. But we don't want to create another constitutional issue on our way there. And those are our comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
And if you want to send me more detailed commentary, that's perfect as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Up next in the line is Miss Betty Andrews. Betty, I don't see you, but you're next on my list of hands. So you're up next.
Okay, I am unmuted, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, senators, for having me and allowing me to speak. I'm Betty Andrews. I'm president of the Iowa-Nebraska NAACP, representing 30 units of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And we are here today to oppose this bill and ask that you would do so as well. Just a reminder that the NAACP is the organization that successfully argued the landmark case of Brown versus the Board of Education. And we are in that vein in opposition to this bill. One other thing I'd like you all to consider before moving forward with this bill is that I know that in the area of criminal justice, there's a minority impact statement. I think that this bill also merits a look at the minority impact. So if you all could look at it from that angle as well. So the NAACP, as I said, opposes SSB 1065. The NAACP believes very strongly that charter schools need more oversight, transparency, and diversity accountability. And it opposes funding them until this happens. And it also opposes funding them at the expense of meeting the needs of public school students. That's especially true in the midst of a pandemic that is plaguing our state and the nation, which is driving classes online and has special impact on low-income families and children of color. Data shows that charter schools have challenges when it comes to best outcomes for Black and Hispanic students, including negligible academic improvements, harsher discipline, and higher suspension rates. We oppose legislation that diverts education funding away from providing quality public education to students and toward charter schools, particularly private charter schools and schools with less accountability around diversity. We believe that this bill is not in alignment with our objectives. It is wrong to deny local school boards who choose to embrace voluntary desegregation plans and the tools that they need to sustain such plans. The proposed bill would remove a district's authority to enforce its voluntary diversity plan, thereby modifying implementation of desegregation plans by state fiat, and remove the State Board of Education's role in establishing voluntary diversity plans. Resources should be allocated according to need. This bill would potentially finance a cycle that could lead to segregation of Iowa schools, reducing funds, allowing wealthier families to flee public schools for less diverse charter or private schools, and reducing funds for poor and minority students. That would take us backwards and away from the hopes and intentions expressed in the landmark case of Brown versus the Board of Education. Further, everything about this bill runs counter to a golden moment for Iowa 152 years ago in 1868, when the Iowa Supreme Court held racial segregation of Muscatine schools violated the Iowa Constitution principle of equal rights to all, upon which our government is founded.
Okay,
Iowans have long been proud of that. Even 86 years before the Brown versus the Board of Education ruling, the Muscatine School Board in Iowa committed to an inclusive vision that its schools would be organized into one harmonious people. Tragically, this bill would cast the exceptional legacy of Clark into the dustbin of history. The NAACP strongly urges you to vote no for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Keenan Crow. And again, I need to ask you to make sure we're limiting the amount of time. If you have extended comments, please forward those to me, but let's limit comments to 2 to 3 minutes because we do have about 18 people left to speak. Go ahead, Keenan.
All right, thank you, Senator, and thank you for allowing me time to speak. My name is Keenan Crow. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy with One Iowa. We represent LGBTQ Iowans across the state. When I saw SSB 1065, my first thought as a policy wonk was to see what policies are of accredited non-public schools in Iowa in relation to LGBTQ folks. So we did a study. Out of 181 non-public accredited schools in Iowa, we were able to locate 176 policies, so pretty much all of them. Then we applied 4 criteria to determine if they might discriminate against LGBTQ people in admissions or in employment. The 4 criteria were: 1, an explicit statement indicating that they would expel students or terminate staff for their LGBTQ status; 2, a specific statement reserving the right to discriminate against LGBTQ students and staff; 3, listing gender identity and sexual orientation in an anti-harassment policy, but not in an anti-discrimination policy, implying that there is recognition that these classes exist, but that have been intentionally not included for anti-discrimination purposes; or 4, a specific combination of words in the policy that match associated prohibitions. For instance, a policy stating that sexual immorality would not be permitted, with the institution's associated church stating that homosexuality is sexually immoral. What we found here was pretty shocking to me. 75% of Iowa's non-public schools meet at least one of those 4 criteria, and only 15% specifically list sexual orientation and gender identity in their non-discrimination policies. The other 10% either didn't have posted non-discrimination policies, or their non-discrimination policies didn't indicate in any way how they would handle discrimination against LGBTQ folks. Now, these non-public schools have every right to teach their religious principles as they see fit, right? They have every right under Iowa law to prevent discrimination in this way. However, there's nothing that obligates taxpayers to provide support for those institutions that intend to permit discrimination. Iowa non-public schools have told us loud and clear what they're going to do when they are permitted to discriminate. A measly 15% have protections for sexual orientation and gender identity without any legal requirement to do so. So we are wholly opposed to voucher programs like the ones contained in Division 1 for this reason. We believe that public dollars should stay at public institutions where discrimination is prohibited by law. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Keenan. Just going through, up next, Trish Wilger. After that will be Phil Jennery and Drew Klein. So just as a heads up, getting ready to go. So Trish, you're up.
Good morning. My name's Trish Wilger. I'm the Executive Director of Iowa Advocates for Choice in Education and Iowa Alliance for Choice in Education. We appreciate the governor introducing this bill, which gives more options to Iowa parents, specifically Iowa public school parents. This is about giving parents the ability to choose what they feel works best for their child. It gives education savings accounts to a portion of parents who would like to make a different choice than what they currently have. It also it expands public charter schools, which currently there's not many options there in Iowa. One thing we've not touched upon yet is that it gives a tuition and textbook tax credit to all K-12 Iowa parents, public school, private school, and homeschool. So it can support all parents in making choices for their child's education and supporting those choices. It also expands open enrollment. So all of these things are putting parents in the driver's seat, giving parent options. So we wholeheartedly support giving options to Iowa parents, and we would ask that you
Hey, thank you so much. I'm Phil Jennery with the Iowa Association of School Boards, and we are opposed to Senate Study Bill 1065 for really a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is the creation of expansion of voucher programs in those states, that once they have started, that they quickly expand and don't really do the purpose intended to do. Secondly, transparency and accountability as to how those funds are spent. Public schools go through a public audit they are under the open meetings, open records laws, and they are accountable to a publicly elected school board. Finally, the cost of this bill, both in terms of the state budget and what it could mean for some of our schools who are already identified in need of assistance.
So if I could interrupt for a moment, I'm so sorry. We have some people on this call who are not actual people on this call. You will be removed immediately if you don't have a face and or name. I will not tolerate pornography or hidden insults. You will be removed from the subcommittee. Sorry, Phil, thank you. Please continue.
Yep, you bet. So yeah, just kind of bringing up that that the costs would be pretty staggering to the budget. We calculated if all eligible students chose to take these vouchers, that the cost to the state would be nearly $54 million, not the $3 million proposed in the governor's budget. So as we can see, once something like this is started, it expands very quickly, and that is more money being diverted from public schools. So happy to discuss this further with you, and thank you so much for your time. And we just would urge you to oppose Senate Study Bill 1065. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And we have worked with your organization as well with some changes that you would like seen. And so I am mindful of those. And if you have further comments, please submit them. Again, I'm going to point out, and Phil, I apologize for interrupting you. If you do not have your face or your name typed out or a reasonable background, you will be removed from this subcommittee. What is happening is disgusting, and if that's what you think is a good idea to have included in a subcommittee on educational topics, then you honestly don't deserve to be a part of that conversation. Drew Klein, you're up next. Please keep your comments brief.
Thank you, Senators. Appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I'll certainly keep it brief. As a recipient of the Iowa tuition grant, I appreciate that our state doesn't narrowly view education as only coming from government-sponsored institutions. And I think it's important that when we think about how we fund education, that we're really focusing on families and individual needs rather than buildings and institutions. And so we're registered in favor of this bill because it moves us in that direction. And quite frankly, what we look forward to is an environment where this type of flexibility in funding across private schools, public charter schools, open enrollment, all of these different pieces are really part of the design of our funding formula, rather than being treated as some sort of specialty or as a privilege that only some get to take advantage of. And so certainly this bill is big and complex. We anticipate that it will likely continue to evolve as it moves through the process. We want to be part of that conversation, but we appreciate the fact that the governor has brought it forward, that we're moving forward in education reform in this direction, and that you guys are hosting this subcommittee this morning. We certainly encourage you to support the bill.
Thank you. Up next, we have Will Keeps. After Will, we'll have Damian Thompson and I'm sorry, Pasuk. That'll be the next order. Will, you are up.
Am I good now?
You are good. Thank you.
So my name is Will Keeps. I am the president of Starts Right Here. And I'm going to tell y'all for real, I don't want to fight about this. This is a no-brainer. We got kids out there that's being trafficked. When we sleep at night, they're out there being trafficked. We got kids that are being killed. We got kids that are selling drugs. We got kids that are turning into alcoholics. We got kids that are doing so many different things that are not going to school. Now, the more public schools, they work with a lot of kids that are great. We have, but there's a bunch of kids in there that's not doing great. So they need an option. And with Starts Right Here, we already proved that we have 10 kids, we only can have 10 kids right now, that are actually doing well, who has dropped out or not even going to school. We have brought resources up in here, but we got a kid who loves agriculture. So we brought Mike Nagy up in here, and Mike Nagy is helping this kid with agriculture. We got a kid who wants to be a diesel tech. So we brought the CEO of Ruan here, and Ben McLean. He came in here and wants to do an apprenticeship for our kid to become a diesel tech. And this kid literally wasn't going to school at all. We have proven that we can get kids inside the school if we change how education looks for some of our kids who don't want to be in the structural education that they're used to. So we're trying to find different ways and and build some of these relationships so these kids can actually have the resources that'll come inside the charter schools and really say, look, you can be this person. You can have this career. You can be anything that you want to be. And I don't want to fight about no money or nothing like that. I will partner with anybody when it comes down to this, because it's about the kids, period. So my thing is like, we can make this happen. We just want to give them another choice, because there's a lot of kids who do not want to be in the same educational system. I mean, I don't understand what the problem is. I'm tired of seeing our kids being lost. And that's white, black, Latino, Chinese, whatever. I'm tired of them being lost, so let's give them another option. And let's do it together, because we do it together, we can actually make it work and help everybody be successful. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Will. Damian, you are up next. Damian Thompson.
Thank you so much, Senators. My name is Damian Thompson. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Communications for Iowa Safe Schools. We are the Midwest's largest LGBTQ youth serving organization. And so we are registered formally against this bill. And I'm just going to provide you some interesting data kind of explaining our stance on this piece of legislation. So LGBTQ students do best in schools, whether they're public or private, religious or secular, that support and affirm them, much like any other student. Supports in these schools might include policies that protect students from harassment and discrimination, support the presence of GSAs, and inclusive curricula as well. Unfortunately, this is not even the case in well-resourced religious schools that are subsidized with taxpayer funds at the expense of less resourced public schools. According to a recent GLSEN survey, private religious schools are where LGBTQ students, in fact, face the most significant challenges. LGBTQ students at private religious schools experience more discrimination than LGBTQ students at any other type of school and have the best access to the essential supports for their well-being and academic achievement. Thus, most private schools are benefiting from private school programs are also the setting where LGBTQ students are the least likely to be able to learn and thrive. In fact, a recent investigative report found that religious schools, private religious schools, that receive taxpayer dollars openly operate so-called counseling programs for LGBTQ students that establish damaging conversion therapy practices in our very own schools. A similar report found that at least 14% of surveyed religious schools actively discriminate against LGBTQ youth as well as their staff. Under the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is particularly urgent that these funds are not diverted away from such purposes. LGBTQ students, as well as students of color and disabled students, are uniquely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. The strain caused by the pandemic, combined with heightened visibility and escalation of racial tensions, have increased the number of students who have social, emotional, learning, and mental health needs that create barriers to learning. We need to be providing adequate funding for current public schools rather than diverting that to other places. So, in conclusion, I urge the members of this subcommittee to reject this legislation and instead provide truly adequate funding for Iowa schools. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Damian. Up next, we have Paris. Am I pronouncing? I know I'm not, but you're up next.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Paris Pasuk. I'm a public high school senior, and I believe that this legislation would undermine public schools, hurt our communities, and lower our quality of education. Private schools are detrimental to our education system in that they appropriate resources from our communities while remaining inaccessible to the majority of the student population. The ability for students to transfer out of their assigned school districts with discretion and any efforts to assist the transfer of students to private schools using educational vouchers drains resources and students from our public education system. Properly funded public school districts have the ability to create diverse and productive communities and provide a high quality of education. A school that is suffering from lack of resources or is underserving its students would be better suited to receive sufficient funding than to lose students to wealthier districts and private schools. While the state runs a budgetary surplus, Iowa schools are suffering from underfunding. Over my 13 years in the Iowa public school system, I have witnessed consistent budgetary cuts to departments and extracurricular activities. The underperformance of public schools is a symptom of legislation like this, which strips our schools of the necessary tools to serve its students. Facilitating the further drain of resources from public schools is clearly not a decision that benefits Iowa youth. For those reasons, any budgetary appropriation to Iowa's education system should go towards the improvement of public school districts, and SSB 1065 should be stopped. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Up next, are we at the top? We have Mike Owen, and that will be followed by Kate Parks and Bill Gustav. Mike, you are on.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'm the Deputy Director of Common Good Iowa. We are registered against this legislation. We see many flaws in the study bill, but three that are simply fatal. First, this legislation fundamentally changes and may radically reverse Iowa's longstanding commitment to public education and to equal opportunity for every Iowa child. Second, it diverts taxpayer dollars to private schools that Iowa taxpayers have no responsibility to support, while shortchanging public responsibilities shared by every taxpayer. And I would mention that the last speaker, I thought, did an eloquent job of expressing some of those concerns. Third, we need to be enhancing equity in Iowa, not restricting it. While small steps toward equity and transportation funding have begun for public schools, the voucher and open enrollment steps in this bill will blow other equity concerns out of the water. Vouchers offer no benefits to students in areas without private schools, and the diverted funding will make it more difficult for public schools to serve students in every town and every neighborhood. The open enrollment changes would undermine the sense of community that starts in our schools even more than open enrollment does now. Diversity plans are a tool to keep all families in a community together behind shared goals and responsibilities to provide the strongest schools for every child. Our research has shown that Iowa is already quite generous to private schools through a variety of programs without this radical addition. Finally, I would say that vouchers are like any bad public subsidy. They are giveaways of tax dollars without public accountability or a public purpose. And they are expensive, over $50 million from these latest estimates. And that is just a foot in the door for public funding that is certain to expand. Yet it is clear that this threat to public schools is only the beginning. Already we have seen with the voucher light program in place, this to be the case, the school tuition organization tax credits, which have tripled in cost despite such early assurances of their limited use. For all the rosy language that surround this proposal violates the very foundation of what Iowans have been told is their commitment to education. We urge your rejection of this legislation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Kate Parks, you're up next.
Hello, Senators. Thanks for hearing us today. I'm also speaking to register opposition to this bill as a school board member, as a parent of public school students, as a product of public schools in Iowa, and as an educator myself. I think I wholeheartedly agree with everything that the last speaker said, as well as many other comments that brought up the multitude of issues that this bill will bring for public schools. I think it's really important to be clear that public money needs to stay in public schools and it needs to benefit the students, the most amount of students. 480,000 students will benefit from public education compared to only 10,000 students who would benefit from this bill as we move to the savings account option. I also think it's important to be clear about which parents really do have choice, because we know that that's not equal. And a lot of the studies on voucher programs and on charter schools show that these things serve to increase inequality. They serve to increase segregation, particularly when you're looking at racial segregation and socioeconomic segregation, and not every parent will have a choice. Schools, especially private schools, get to make a determination of who they enroll and who they reject. And so to make it seem as if this is going to create equal choice for all parents is just fundamentally not true. It's going to create choice for parents who already have advantages within this system. And it's unclear to me, and I think should be part of your consideration, that the current system is failing in some way to provide students who want a private education that opportunity. I also think it's important to keep in mind that while charter schools that are public can be successful for students because of the accountability that comes from the state, this bill also includes the option for private charter schools which have no accountability and less regulation, and that would be funded by our taxpayer dollars. So I think that though there was a claim at the beginning that this is not a one-size-fits-all policy and that it does promote local control, in fact, it does the exact opposite. It reduces local control, and it is it's a one-size-fits-all policy without acknowledging the differences between our districts, without acknowledging how urban districts have different needs and their kids need different things than kids in rural districts. And it blatantly takes away some of that control by removing diversity plans that larger districts have chosen. So in a way, you could think of that as removing parental choice for parents who want a quality public education that's diverse, because this bill would basically eliminate districts' abilities to do that. So all in all, I think that we really need to focus on how we can continue to improve our public education in a way that will benefit all of our students. And certainly taking money away from that system and giving it to private schools is not going to be what helps our kids.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Bill Gustav, you're up next, and I would just step in and remind, we still have 9 speakers, and so I need as much brevity as possible. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief. I'm Bill Gustav with Homeschool Iowa. We're a statewide home support organization for thousands of homeschooling families in Iowa. I'm a native Iowan, a product of home education, the son of a public school teacher who poured love and good work into her students, just like most teachers do. I'm a former school board member, and I'm a former skeptic of school choice issues who's become one of the chief advocates for it. So we appreciate that Governor Reynolds and the Iowa legislature are willing to talk about these important issues and options that are currently unavailable to students. Some of these are options that I would have appreciated in my own school to have available to me as growing up, but I didn't have them. We appreciate that you're standing with parents to have more options to choose the best option to educate their children. We're generally supportive of the direction of the bill. We have some concerns with other issues, but we'll work with the legislature for some improvements, and we'd like to see the bill move forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bill. All right, so I have up next Melissa Peterson, followed by Quincy Tate and Jenny Turner. So Melissa, welcome, and look forward to hearing from you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chair. Melissa Peterson with the Iowa State Education Association. We are registered adamantly in opposition of this bill, but I will not repeat all of the points that folks in opposition have repeated before me. I just want to make a couple of points, if I could, briefly. One, I think it's very important for folks to recognize that under Division 1, there will be winners and losers. We have a number of districts that I would call private school deserts, where there are not alternatives to public schools. And so it's very important that we make sure, if we're going to make additional investments in education, that those investments go to benefit the largest number of folks. I will also say, if you do not find that argument persuasive, I would really like you to direct your attention to Division 8, that highlights the governor's idea, or rather reinforces the idea that school boards ought to have a significant amount of accountability because they are stewards of public funds. You will be creating additional stewards of public funds with your charter school expansion proposal in Division 2, as well as the additional investments you are looking to make into private education. To that end, if you decide to further incentivize private schools or non-public education opportunities, we truly hope that you will apply the same accountability and transparency measures to those very non-public school options. That's it for me at the moment. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Up next, we have Quincy Tate.
Hello, my name is Quincy Tate, and I'm a public school student opposing this bill. I really wanted to focus briefly on the effects on students with disabilities of supporting charter schools. Firstly, charter schools disproportionately expel students with disabilities, according to a Harvard study, and supporting charter schools without significant oversight, which we currently lack, would be enabling an ableist system. According to a US News study, students with disabilities are suspended at a rate 20% higher than those without disabilities. Secondly, I'd just like to focus on some common fallacies. First, I've heard some supporters of this bill that have said that this bill would be giving parents a choice to choose where they send their students to go. But the reality is that giving some parents a choice in this particular case is also taking away that choice from other parents. What we need is a system that supports and helps all children so that parents don't have to make a choice where they're going to send their kids to school, because wherever they send their kids, they'll have equal opportunity. By instead investing more money into public schools, we can receive better outcomes, these outcomes that we typically only see with charter schools, except for all students, regardless of ability level. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. And Quincy, did I miss it? Where do you attend school?
I attend Iowa City West in Iowa City.
Thanks, Quincy. Just curious where we were getting students in from today. Thank you so much. Up next, we have, looks like Jenny Turner, and then followed by that will be Eric Knost and Ann McGlenn.
Hi, I'm Jenny Turner. I'm a school speech therapist through Heartland AA, and I strongly oppose this bill. I used to live in Texas for graduate school, and since I've moved back to Iowa to start a family, we primarily moved for our good public schools. I started with a caseload of about 38 kids, which was vastly better than what I had in Texas, and I felt so much more effective. My caseload has gone up and up in all of the subsequent years as our funding has been cut. And it has made a difference in my ability to be effective. I live in West Des Moines, and I know a lot of parents who have the money for private school, but they choose to send their kid to public school because our public schools are good. And I also have friends whose children go to Catholic schools for religious reasons, and they've made that choice not because the schools are better. I have been in both private schools and public schools since I worked for the AEA, and the educational achievement is very similar in the two types of schools. Just as something that's a little bit different from everyone else who I agree with that's opposed, I very much question the part about using funding for private therapies, standardized testing, and tutoring. Being in schools as a speech therapist, I sometimes get reports from outside therapy institutions or tutoring, and almost all of them suggest therapy for those kids because it's fee for service. And most kids could benefit from some sort of extra tutoring or therapy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they need it. And public schools and AEAs, sorry about that, they are accountable to determine need for services in a science-based way. And I have received reports sometimes from outside therapy places suggesting therapy based on very little data. And I have concerns that if vouchers were used for that, it would be a public giveaway with no accountability for evidence-based services, in addition to being opposed to vouchers in general, because public money should be for public schools, and we need that money to be effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Eric, you are up. Eric Knost.
Hi, my name is Eric Knost. I'm a superintendent at a public school in the state of Iowa. And I've been in public education for 33 years. I'm a product of public schools and a huge advocate for public education and the kids we serve. You know, there's been a lot of talk about the importance of choice, and I just want to give you a public school superintendent and leader's perspective that this choice, it's skewed a bit. You cannot forget that the vast majority of folks, not only in this state, but everywhere, choose public education. Public education has to exist. We don't pick our students. And by the way, let's don't forget, we're in a state that already entertains open enrollment, and we deal with that. In the previous state I worked in, we did not have open enrollment. So that's been new to me, but I see that gives parents a lot of choice. But here's a perspective why choice is an interesting thing to say about this. In a district like mine, we serve 3,000 families, and we have families in our system that already choose private school. These are families that we'll probably never see. We have a lot of pride in our public school, and our families do not want to see their public dollars shift to private education. And some will say, hey, it's a simple math problem. If you don't have that kid, you don't need the money associated with that kid. But think about that. If next year, if there are 10 kindergartners that never stepped into my school district, that have decided, and probably already decided, to go to the private school, now they're going to take roughly, $70,000 out of the budget that I manage. That's not going to allow me to cut a teacher, to sell a bus, to turn the heat down, the air conditioning down. The cost stays the same. $70,000 out the door. That's staff. That's a teacher leaving, and our numbers going up. That is an impact to choice. It's an impact to children. And even if a bill like this would cause more kids to flow to private, I think we can all agree that still public is going to remain the vast majority of the choice of Iowans and schools and parents everywhere. That's fact. You can look at that. Somebody mentioned earlier, many people can afford private, don't make that choice. They appreciate and have pride in their public schools. I'll leave it at that. I definitely would be available to answer any questions from a school leader's perspective. I will mention charters. A little bit perplexed about some of the things were said earlier. You don't have to go far studying charters to see the hundreds of millions of dollars in states that have flown away from traditional publics into charters only to see them fail. The failure rate of charter schools in this country is enormous, and it's not a viable option to flow money away from public schools. So again, I'm a huge advocate for kids. I'm a huge advocate for public schools. And I think there's just a little bit of a short-sighted approach to looking at this as adding choice. It may add choice for a select few people. It is going to potentially open a door to decimate public funding for schools and the quality of schools where most people choose to send their children to. And senators, thank you for this opportunity to talk, and thank you for your advocacy for public education.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for your passion. We have 5 members of the public left on our list to speak: Ann McGlynn, Anderson, Chuck Hurley, Fred Maheri, and Peter Hurd. We will do them in that order, and then we'll get to senator comments. Ann, if you could step up and take about 2 minutes so that everyone has an opportunity to speak.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Ann McGlynn. I grew up on a farm in Clinton County. I'm a graduate of DeWitt Central High School. I now live in Davenport. My 2 sons attend Davenport Central High School. And I'm also the executive director of Tapestry Farms, which is an urban farm system that invests in refugee families in our community. Many of our kids attend Davenport schools. I, as a parent and a community member, I am strongly opposed to this bill. I see over and over again the results of disinvestment in communities in our state, and this bill would disproportionately affect the communities that have already seen what I would argue is generations of disinvestment. I was stunned to even hear that this bill was being introduced in the state of Iowa, where we deeply, deeply value our public education system. Our state relies on public education so that everyone can thrive. And as of right now, there are some school districts, including Davenport, who aren't even at the same level of per pupil funding as other school districts in our state. And I know that I think there's 7 years left on that plan to get that inequity fixed. But Davenport schools don't even get the same amount of per pupil funding as others in the state. And this bill would affect Davenport schools. There's 4 schools in our district that children could opt out of. And we also have an anti-discrimination policy in regards to open enrollment that also would affect our school district. So I am strongly against. I would be happy to talk with anyone who would like more thoughts. Thank you for this time.
Thank you very much, Ann. Up next, we have Anderson. You've been very patient. If you could keep your comments to a couple of minutes, that'd be great.
Yes, hi, my name's Anderson Santee. I have kids that are in the private school, and I'm also on the school board here in Dubuque, Iowa. And I'm also appointed to 2 state boards, committees by the governor, one for STEM and the other one is for volunteer in Iowa. And I oppose this bill as well for the same reason everyone else who opposed the bill mentioned. And there's a few things that I just want to point out. Here in Iowa, we're trying to be a state that moves everyone forward. We're trying to be data driven. We're moving towards more technology and making sure that we are able to prepare our families to this technical world. So a few questions I want the legislators to think about. Number one, how does this bill eliminate the racial disparities? We've already had racial disparities in our country and even in our state of Iowa. How will this bill specifically reduce that? How will we reach 70% of Iowans being future ready? This isn't a governor initiative. She wants to make sure 70% are future ready. Will this bill help or reduce that? How will this help recruit and retain talent? This is a workforce issue. If this bill moves forward, will we retain talent or lose? And those people work in our communities, right? If we have vacant school buildings, what would that produce? Crime. How will this improve educational outcomes for students who have an IEP, a disability, or who are students of ELL? And I'll share this last story with you. I personally had conversation with the private school, and we have both good public and private schools. And I mentioned to the private school, do you have the resources to help a student who is on IEP? They looked at me and said, no, we don't. So why are we giving public dollars to private institutions that don't have the tools nor resources to help all of our children? This is going to have a huge negative impact that will disproportionately impact poor, middle class, and our racial students. So I am totally not in favor of this. And I hope our legislators will truly live by our goals and missions to do what's best for all Iowans, not some. Thank you.
Thank you, Anderson. Chuck Hurley, you're up.
Thanks, Senators. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm with the family leader. We strongly support this. We believe that parents need to be more involved, not less involved, in picking the best education for their children. I think everybody on this call is interested in student outcomes, and I would just point us to facts, not fear. 24 of 26 empirical studies show that school choice programs actually improved public school academic outcomes. I think that's probably because of competition. We shouldn't be afraid of competition. We should welcome competition. And what we really need to do with education policy, in our opinion, is be first and foremost concerned about the students' outcomes. We should fund children and not particular systems. And any public school that's concerned about this bill, that's doing a good job with the children, should not have anything to fear. This is targeted towards schools that are not doing well. And we think that children deserve access to a quality education, regardless of their address, regardless of their race, their income, and to give parents a chance to choose a better education for their sons and daughters. Children should not be forced to fail because the state ties them to a school that's failing them. Finally, children thrive best when parents are involved. State mandates and regulations cannot replace parents. We need an education system that respects, honors, and encourages parents to take more responsibility for their own children's education. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chuck. Fred Maheri, you're up.
Good morning. I'm Fred Maheri, and I'm a retired school superintendent, and just want to share a few perspectives, thinking back to Eric and thinking back to some other comments that have been made. I'm very much opposed to 1065, and I'm opposed for the following reasons. I think our focus right now should be on getting all of our students and our teachers back into, and our workers back into school safely. And many school districts, I was a school superintendent for 17 years and an administrator for 33. Many school districts are already suffering from lower enrollments and from being underfinanced in the last few years. And when when districts lose student population, there's no budget guarantee. So they have very few dollars to work with. And we need to support public education, which educates right now 92% of our students, at least 92% of our students. And I think we also need to remember that private schools and charter schools and all that are already receiving over $50 million in educational funding in Iowa. So it's not like they aren't funded. And I think we need to look at this not only from the rural school perspective, but also from the urban and the suburban districts. All of those districts are struggling with enrollment right now. And we need to make sure that we do the right thing. And parents and school boards already have adequate choices. If I don't like a school district, I can send my child to a private school or to another public school. It's pretty easy to do that. So this is a mistake. We shouldn't be defunding public schools. We should be supporting public schools in Iowa. They're one of our institutions. We've always prided ourselves on world-class schools, and we need to make sure we put our money behind that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And our final member of the public to speak today, Peter Hurd. Are you ready to speak with us?
Yes, thanks. There's a lot of good points made today. My name is Pete Hurd with the Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. We oppose SSB 1065. One part of state programs that everyone seems to agree on is the transparency and accountability of the people's money. Those who spend state money should have publicly elected boards and being able to allow public input. When we privatize government services, we find the profits are more concerned than people. We don't want Iowa's education system to be used to fund a corporate for-profit business when the primary goal is to make money over educating Iowans. Let's just keep working on the programs we have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. Now I want to go, and Senator Trungary, I do see your hand up, but first I need to get to the senators who are on the subcommittee. You will have opportunity to speak in committee later, but right now I want to make sure that in our 90 minutes that we have, that Senators Cornbach and Zahn have opportunity to speak to the bill. Senator Cornbach, you are on.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Sorry. Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Thank you for holding this meeting today. I appreciate the need to try to keep everybody to 2 to 3 minutes. I think we've succeeded in getting just about everybody in so far who's not a legislator. But I would point out that this bill was introduced only last, Thursday or maybe Wednesday night. So the awareness of the bill across the state has been growing, but is still limited. And the massive outpouring of input today, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the beginning. So I understand that this bill is likely to be fast-tracked through the legislature, perhaps coming up for floor debate as early as this Thursday. I hope I'm wrong on that. But I really think that we should slow this process down to allow awareness to build, allow the details to be examined more carefully, and really to take the full measure of this. The predominant response today has been negative, not without some advocates, but predominantly negative. To foster that process, the Senate Democratic Caucus will be sponsoring a Zoom meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And anybody who wants to participate may do that. You just go to www.senate.iowa.gov/Democrats, and then you will find links that get to the Zoom meeting. So anybody who'd like to participate at a more extended time frame is welcome to do that. A couple of quick observations. First, with regard to charter schools, the research on charter schools is actually quite mixed. They do not show a decided advantage over regular publics or traditional public schools. Some cases, there have been some improvements in some test scores, but other cases, they've actually done worse. Now, we've had charter schools in this state for a long time. We had a limit of 10, and then we had a limit of 20, and now we have no limit. But in actual fact, we've never had even as many as 10, and I think we're down to about 2 now. So charter schools is not a good fit for Iowa. And what's new about this bill is the alternate pathway, a founding group state board methodology. This would exempt the charter school from any responsibility or control to the local school board, and therefore to the local property taxpayers. Part of the funding would come from those taxpayers. They should have a say in the accountability. just a general observation here. There's lots to say about the various details, but we live in an increasingly divided society. It's divided by race, it's divided by income, it's divided by education level and social class. Large percentages of minority students attend minority majority schools, and similarly for white students. Deleting or prohibiting the diversity plans, the modest diversity plans we have, only would serve to increase that problem and increase the degree to which we are moving towards separate societies. Charters, vouchers, anti-diversity, they all move us in that wrong direction. So that's all I have to say for right now. The Senate Education Subcommittee will be considering this bill at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Public participation is not provided for in that case, but the public can listen in.
Thank you, Senator Cornbach, very much. Senator Zahn, do you have some comments?
Yes, thank you, Senator Sinclair, for putting me on this subcommittee. As you know, and a lot of people that are on this call know, this is one of my top priorities. Every year I've been here, I have filed a bill giving parents the opportunity to make their best educational choices. I was also down here, and I know Senator Cornbach was here as well, when we passed the diversity plan, and I voted against it at that time. It wasn't anything to do with diversity. And what it was is we've got 5 school districts in the state of Iowa, one that's in the local community here, one that part of the Senate district that I represent is in. And what has happened to me, I've never seen where it's been more about diversity rather than limiting students to opt out to a different school district. And I know that that's a big component of this bill. I've had this bill in the last several years as well. Tell that to the parents of these school districts, and particularly the Des Moines Public Schools, that wanted to open enroll their kids because the Des Moines Public Schools decided to shut down all the extracurricular activities. A lot of these parents that I heard from are seniors, which eliminated a lot of opportunities for scholarships and so on. But most importantly, it's part of a well-rounded education that these students get involved in extracurricular activities. I know it's been mentioned about minorities, which is what we're talking about, the diversity part of this bill. It's contrary to what is being communicated. I have studied this issue many, many years in other parts of the United States. Some minorities are the biggest beneficiaries of being able to get out of these bad schools. And so they are a huge beneficiary to this. I agreed with Will Keeps in regards to, let's just open it up. Let's let kids go where they want to go, where their best opportunities. Everybody knows that there's certain school districts that do a better job, or I guess I'll rephrase that they offer more diverse learning opportunities. Some school districts are limited with that. This gives parents the choice to decide what is the best school in their area, public or non-public. I know there's a lot of great public schools in the metropolitan area as well as the state of Iowa. You should not have to go to school based on where your zip code is. I have personally seen, and I think it's no secret here, that I've sent most of my students to a non-public school, or my kids, excuse me, and I have seen firsthand where through the STO, where the opportunity for some kids in the Des Moines area to go to such as Dowling High School or Des Moines Christian, and it has absolutely been life-changing for some of these kids. So I think that this is another thing that's huge. You know, my only regret here is it isn't going farther. I'm going to work the rest of this session to make sure that we open this up so more parents have more opportunities, because as you know, this bill is stated, and I give credit to the governor for having the courage to bring this up. is that it is for the lower performing schools, which is where I think we should start. And I have seen literally many dozens of studies that do the opposite of what is being communicated with a lot of the people on this Zoom call, where student performance does improve. I'm just a business person, and I know this, that when I have competition, it improves me as a business person. And I believe that this is a huge step forward for the students and the parents in the state of Iowa to have an opportunity and to grow. And bottom line, that's what everyone on this Zoom call wants to do, is to give better opportunities and increase our student performance. And I think this is a first step in the right direction. So thank you very much. I'm ready to sign on the subcommittee and to move this bill forward.
Thank you. And finally, I would just say that part of this conversation does happen outside of this format. Given the global pandemic, we have had individuals and groups communicating with us on issues that they have within the bill. And so I will say that we've been hearing you, and we do have some proposed changes just to get at some of those concerns. And so while that's not at this point ready, we have heard you and we are including those changes. Senator Cornbach mentioned that this bill would be being considered this afternoon at 3 p.m. in full committee, and you may, there isn't a public participation portion as there was with this conversation, but you may view that conversation this afternoon at 3 p.m. on the legis.iowa.gov website. You can watch that as it's live streamed. You know, I think what time do we have? Senator Trungart, we probably have a couple of minutes if you would like to say a couple of words, but I will need to limit that just a couple of minutes because I'll need to wrap up comments here as we move this forward.
Thank you, Senator Sinclair. I want to thank all of the public school students and public school educators and staff and administrators and parents who are on this call today, because that was a voice that was left out entirely of the drafting of this bill. Even the Department of Education did not know what was in it before it was presented to the Senate. And it's a real shame that this subcommittee hearing for the public is happening during the school day and during the working hours when most public school educators, students, and parents cannot take part. And the way that this bill is being rushed through in such a quick way, and only giving an hour and a half to speak to the issues, we don't know if any of those public comments on the website will be read. But just to let you know that even despite the very short notice we've gotten to the public about this incredibly consequential bill, I have not received one email from a constituent or anyone else in support of this bill. The hundreds of emails I've received have been, again, just over the top against defunding our public schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. The conversation about choice in education didn't start in Iowa. It didn't start with Republicans, frankly. It started with a group of folks in, I mean, where I first heard of it was in urban Milwaukee. And it started with a representative from urban Milwaukee and a former Black Panther who got together because they were tired of seeing their kids robbed of an education and not given an opportunity to take their children anywhere else that would serve them better. And that really spoke to me, the fact that school choice shouldn't be about politics. It should be about making the right decisions for students in the right places and at the right times. And that ultimately, when we talk about accountability and we talk about transparency, that accountability and transparency ultimately should rest on the shoulders of the parents of those children. They are, naturally, we have to acknowledge it from natural law, they are the managers, if you will, of their children, those minority children. Their rights rest within their parents. And so when we talk about transparency and accountability, that ought to be going to the parents, not to bureaucrats, to be quite honest. And so when we're talking about school choice, we're talking about giving back to parents the rights to hold accountable the systems that are in place for their child's education. I think Senate Study Bill 1065 is a step towards doing that. It's a step towards placing in the hands of parents the opportunity to hold systems accountable who may or may not be serving their children as best they could. I will tell you, I have 3 children, and my 3 children have gone through public school. I currently have a 14-year-old at Wayne Community School District, and my child is being served well. Regardless of this bill or anything else, my child will graduate from Wayne Community School District, barring any unforeseen circumstances. I wouldn't dream of another opportunity for him because he's receiving exactly what he needs there. But that's not the case for all students. And it's certainly not the case for some students who simply can't even have an opportunity to make a choice. And so this bill goes a long ways towards addressing many of my concerns regarding the choice for parents and their children in the education and ultimate determination of their own destiny. So I'm excited to move this forward to full committee this afternoon. I will say, as far as being fast-tracked, it is not. The bill was introduced, I assigned it to a subcommittee, and we're holding a subcommittee. In fact, as far as not hearing public voices, most subcommittees are either 15 minutes or 30 minutes. I knew that this would generate much conversation. It's a large bill. And so I intentionally made it a longer subcommittee so that we could hear from all of you. So that's simply not the case. And in fact, this process will have to be repeated twice more because the bill includes both a taxing mechanism as well as an appropriation. And so it will go through both of those committees as well before full debate and the same process being conducted in the House. And I don't believe the House has even started the process. So to suggest that this is a fast-tracked bill is simply not accurate. I'm going to conclude with just a comment really briefly. I first got involved with talking about parental choice in education and student success when I spoke with the director of a private school in Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. has a long-standing voucher system, if you will, and you have to apply to that, and they always have more applicants than they have scholarships available for those students. But the fascinating thing was that there is a small percentage of students, for whatever reason, have gone through the application process, were awarded their scholarship, and then chose not to take it. But the thing that struck me when I heard about that was not that they chose not to take it, but in that empirical double-blind, if you will, opportunity study, the students who were given the opportunity to choose and chose to stay in a public school actually had higher success rates comparatively to their peers who were not even given the opportunity to choose. They ended up having higher entrance into post-secondary education, higher graduation rates, higher success rates in life, just because they were given the opportunity to make their own decision regarding their own destiny for their own future. And so while I would suggest that this bill is limited in scope, and that's okay, I think sometimes in order to take a new step, we do have to try it in a limited basis. I do believe it's the right step to make. And so I will, with Senator Zahn, sign this subcommittee report recommending passage with an amendment, and we will discuss it this afternoon in full committee at 3 p.m. Thank